This is a Dell Precision 7670. If it's not the flagship, it is certainly approaching the very top of what Dell calls their mobile workstation line, which is to say it's a fairly high-end laptop. I thought it would be fun to just kind of take a look at it for, quirks and features and stuff like that today. It is not mine, and I can't boot it up because the intellectual property contained within it is not mine to share with anybody. But a lot of people just like to see how these laptops are put together and just like to take a look at stuff, and I kind of want to know too. So I hope you're in for a small adventure like that, because that's what we's about to do. The very first quirk I found with the thing was I could not for the life of me figure out how to turn it on. Every laptop I have ever used has, a row of buttons up here somewhere for volume and mute and power button and stuff like that. This guy does not. They have integrated those features into these buttons. So this button way over here at the keypad is actually the power button, and it's just a regular button on the keyboard. Time will tell if that will become annoying in use. If you're using the 10 key and you accidentally hit the power button, does it just go to sleep? But that's just, to me, that's just a goofy design choice. And they've integrated the volume buttons into the F keys, which I just freaking hate. Much prefer to have those as dedicated keys up on the top row. And for that matter, even on a business class machine like this especially, a Wi-Fi enabled disable up there would be nice too. But that's not what they've done. They did this instead, which I think is wacky. This guy has done what I'm going to say is the Mac thing, and there aren't actually mouse buttons anymore. They're in here, but they're like integrated in the touchpad. And at least as someone that doesn't have a lot of time on this machine yet, I absolutely hate it, because you can't just feel your way for the buttons. Or if I move my finger up and I want to move the mouse, I'll be trying to do it down here, and I can't. It's not such a big deal if you're used to just tap clicking to do things. But yeah, this is just awful. Mostly I just reach up, I'm like, okay, I'm on the mouse pad and nothing's happening. So yeah, terrible. Absolutely hate that. Next up, let's take a look at some of the external ports. On the right-hand side, doesn't look like there's anything all that exciting going on. We've got a SD card reader, we have a headphone jack, USB-C, and a super speed USB. I don't know for how much longer we're going to continue to see like USB-A style ports, but I'm glad to see them. And then over here in the corner, I believe we have a cable lock feature, which I've never once used. The left-hand side, we have two more USB-Cs, another standard USB-A, which is another super speed, HDMI out, and a mystery port that looks like it might be a module that can be swapped. My mistake, not a mystery port, that is actually an Ethernet port, but it is like a slim line. So it gets bigger when you plug a cable in, which makes me wonder how it sits on a desk after you do. So let's find out. It's actually okay. The case itself is made such that it has an air gap on the bottom, so that port just sort of hangs out in that volume when it drops down. It's hard to see, but there you go. You can kind of see that it just drops down, occupies that space. So that's an interesting design. And it looks like the final port on this side is the charging port. I will note this is the same charging port mechanism that Dell has been using for like 20 years, except it is not compatible with older chargers, even if they are of the appropriate wattage, which I found somewhat frustrating, but is what it is. On the plus side, the charger this thing came with is not gigantic. This is a 60 watt power supply from yesteryear, and this is a 180 watt power supply it came with. It came with nothing useful in terms of cable management, nothing nearly as nice as the old school rubber strap, but in terms of size and weight, they're pretty similar. This is a 200 watt power supply from an HP from a few years ago, and it is quite literally double the size and at least double the weight, so FYI on all that. Alrighty, now we can get down to what I'm sure everyone is here for, at least what I'm the most interested in, and that is to see what internal access is like and how it looks inside. My benchmark for this is one screw. That is the preferred approach to be able to open a laptop. There should be one screw right here, you take out, and this cover just slides off and pops off. Dell's the only company I've ever seen that did it, and Dell is also a company that has taken it away. But that said, I don't think this one's too bad. I think we just have 6, and they are regular Phillips heads. So hopefully not a big deal to address. So we have one in each of the front corners. It feels like they're captive. And then one in each of the rear corners. Also seems to be captive. Then I think we have one on each side, right like so. We'll get all these guys busted out and we'll catch up in a second. Alrighty, so I've got them all loose. my assumption is we should be able to just pick it off of there. I'm going to get moderately bold and just kind of see if the cover is even loose back here at the hinges. It is not. Double check to make sure all our screws are in fact loose. Oh, I guess they're not captive, or at least that one isn't. So after referring to the manual, which is something I hate doing, those are in fact supposed to be captive screws. They just happen to come out. But despite that, this is still a snap fit and you have to pry it off. They say to pry it at the card reader, and if you ordered a model that doesn't have the card reader right here, then to just start at the corner. The instructions also make specific mention that the cover doesn't come straight up, that you have to push it rearward, which is going to be really interesting considering we have to pry it off. So up here at the corner there might actually be an access made for it. I don't know how well you may be able to see, but it actually looks like there is a little relief in the case right there. It looks like that exists on both sides. Whether or not that's intentional, that is definitely the place to start trying to get in. So I actually had to put that down in my lap so I could see what's going on. There are snaps right across the front. I'll give you a better look at them here in a second. But now the lid hinges up a little, I believe, and now off. Good grief. It's not so bad now that I know how it works, but I'm going to go ahead and give this, I'm going to give it a D+. That's not quite as bad as it could be, but it's really bad considering what it should be is, you know, a screw. As far as snap locations, there are 4 of them. There's one right here, one right here, one right here, and then there's a snap in the cover right here, but there doesn't actually appear to be a mating feature. That may be why they tell you to begin at this corner, because there's not actually a snap there. Anyway, that's where they are. That's where you'll need to apply your pressure. It was somewhat challenging to get this off of here without really chewing it up, but it's off now. But now that we are in, general serviceability doesn't seem so bad. Access to the CPU and cooler should be pretty straightforward. We've got 2 pretty big size fans there. Should also mention this one is equipped with an i9, so I kind of doubt Dell would do a 1-fan, 2-fan system, depending on CPU, but maybe. Here we have something I've never really seen before. Of course, just because I just learned doesn't mean it's new. But this is a format of RAM that I'm unfamiliar with, and it actually says it is DDR5 CAM, C-A-M-M. That's a new one on me. But everything else is looking more or less pretty straightforward. We have a battery which is non-serviceable from the outside without removing that cover. It's just the way things seem to have gone the last several years, but once you're in, doesn't seem so bad. SSD with a couple screws in it and a bracket that has instructions on how to release it, which is always worrisome. Just worrisome in the fact that if it needs special instructions, it could probably be simpler. Like, I don't know why it needs this big bracket unless maybe that's a heatsink. Moving on, we have several unpopulated portions of the board. Looks like we have another full 80mm M2 drive slot over here with another one of the retaining bars or heatsinks or whatever it is. We have another unpopulated, probably 60mm. I would say this is normally like Wi-Fi card sized, but it's empty. You can put anything in there that would fit in there. Then we have a connector right here that is labeled as being another M2 slot, or rather it says SSD slot. And then we have this unpopulated USH connector. So USH is actually for fingerprint scanner stuff, being that this is like an enterprise level laptop, that's not surprising. What was surprising is IR up here is for an actual IR camera. So for reasons I'm not really ready to explain, apparently you can order one of these with an infrared camera. I don't know if that would be forward facing, or I assume it'd be the webcam, but wow, that's weird. And while I was reading, CAM is compression assembled or compression assisted memory module. It sounds like it just sticks down on. You take the screws out and it pops out. I'm not gonna mess with any of that. Another thing that was surprising that I'm also not gonna mess with is apparently the GPU in this thing is on a card. I don't know if that means you could ever upgrade it or not, but if you pull the heat sinks off and pull some of these chipset features and stuff off, the GPU is actually a discrete assembly under here that can be removed. Again, not my circus, not my monkeys. We're already dabbling a little deeper than maybe we probably ought to, but very interesting, the things that are in here. So if you were curious about what the inside of one of these might look like and the real world disassembly procedure, I guess now you know. So now let's take a look at what it realistically takes to put this rear cover back on. Or sorry, bottom cover back on. So I've just got it kind of down in the rear, more or less where it wants to go. I'm just gonna snap. This is like metallicized. There we go. Okay, so there are snaps in the rear too. They just unclip on their own when you take it off, apparently. So now I just need to get all of our not captive screws put back in it. That one feels a little cross-thready. Starting to think maybe I should have recaptivated them when the case was still off. Alrighty then. And if you knew where to look, you could just barely see the evidence that I was in there. That's front left corner. Kind of the same deal here in the front right. Just a little bit of scratching. Still more than I needed to have, considering I have laptops that are held together with a screw. So our final achievement is just going to see if it actually turns back on. Make sure I didn't break the dang thing. Yep, keyboard lit up. It says Dell things. Good enough. So there you go. A few quirks, a few features, and an internal test drive of a brand new Dell workstation grade laptop. I think you can option these things out like right on up to used car money for sure. I think these things start at like $2,000 right now, and probably, I hesitate to even think what you could option one up to, but you know, a lot of money. Is it worth it? You know, I really don't know. As far as design, I think several things could be improved. I just absolutely do not understand why manufacturers have made their cases so much worse over the last 10 years, especially Dell, because the best case I've ever seen is also a Dell. So go figure. Anyway, guys, that's all I got for this one. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll catch you on the next one.